Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I'm going to be discussing my February wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I managed to get to in the month of February, and I'm happy to say that February was a definite improvement on January. Because January, I had 3 DNFs and no 5-star books, and then a bunch of books that I thought were just kind of okay. There were some great books in January, don't get me wrong, but definitely more of a mixed bag. February also kind of was a mixed bag, but I also did get my first 5-star read of the year, which was great. And then I also had another 5-star reread, and then I just had a lot of new favorite books. A couple of bad books, but you know, we'll get to everything. But I'm glad that February was a improvement, and hopefully March will continue that improvement. We'll see. But enough of my rambling. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for this wrap up, I'm going to do it a little bit differently and do it kind of in ascending order of the books that I liked the most. A lot of the times I'll kind of just do it in random order, or I'll just do it in the order that I read them in. But I'm going to try it this way, and definitely comment down below if you enjoyed this way, or if you don't really have a preference, or just comment down how you would like me to do it in the future. But, so if I'm doing it in ascending order, I'm going to talk about the 2 books that I actually DNF'd in February, which is a shame now because I've actually DNF'd 5 books already in 2024, which is crazy because I only DNF'd 10 books last year. So I'm already halfway there in February. Whoo boy. But the 2 books that I DNF'd were both thrillers, which thrillers have definitely been hit or miss for me this year, but we'll jump into it. The first one, She Was the Quiet One by Michelle Campbell. I went into this book not really knowing what it was about. I got it at Barely Used Books in Canada, and I tried it and quickly realized that it was not for me. It's about a set of twins at this like boarding school, and I don't even really remember that. I think it starts out and it's implied that one of the twins has been killed or like they're in trouble or something. But then like after the prologue was pretty interesting, or the first chapter. And then after that it's just teenage drama. And I just did not care. And then it's also you're also following, I think, a professor in here, and then you can kind of tell like, oh, is this gonna go down a weird route? I'm like, you know what, I don't want to find out. So I quickly DNF'd it. I did not enjoy it. Stacy might read it and she'll probably enjoy it more than me. And then the other one I DNF'd was funny because I had DNF'd this book years and years ago when I first tried to read it, and I had basically forgotten why I didn't like it in the first place. And now I know because I DNF'd it again. Our Kind of Cruelty by Arminta Hall. This book is just boring. And it's no wonder I didn't remember, because I typically don't remember boring books very well. And this book is just very boring. Like, it's definitely got, maybe not stalker vibes, but like, I don't even know how to say it. Just delusional vibes. Like this character thinks that another character still loves them, and they're basically following them around and still in their lives. But overall, the main character is just very boring. The people he's following are boring. The character that he's in love with still is boring. And nothing happens in this book, really. So, and I gave it a fair shot. Like, it's a short book. It's less than 300 pages, and I got a little more than 100 pages in. Nothing was happening. I didn't give a damn, so I just decided to DNF it. I'm definitely never trying this book again, but I'm probably not going to read anything by this author I don't know. That might be a little harsh, but this book just definitely was not for me. This next book was actually my Patreon pick for February. And if you don't know, if you're a Patreon member of mine, your name goes on the Patreon wheel spin. And if you happen to win, you get to choose any book that you want for me to read the following month. And Patrick was the winner, and he wanted me to read Aching God by Mike Shell, which is a self-published fantasy novel. I thought it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. Um, it was fine. Like, I didn't really hate anything about this book necessarily, but it was definitely reminiscent of one of my all-time favorite books, which is Kings of the Wild. Right there. One of my all-time favorites. This had a very similar concept where this person is basically retired from doing the thing that he did, and then basically it's him jumping back into that and also going on this long quest to save someone, and there's this magical artifact, and it just felt like not a carbon copy, but it definitely felt like a similar concept to a book that I already love, and it just wasn't nearly as good. Like I said, though, it wasn't bad by any means, but I was just kind of bored, and none of the characters really stood out to me. And it also, you're only following one character, and the other characters aren't very fleshed out to begin with. So overall, just it was fine, but also very forgettable. I'm definitely not checking out the sequels to this book. The next book I have to talk about is Only If You're Lucky by Stacy Willingham. And this was the February pick for Thrill Chill or Kill Book Club. If you don't know what that is, over on the Book Astronomer Discord, every month, me and Stacy choose a thriller and or horror book to read in that month. We've got the schedule right here. If you're interested at all to check out any of these books upcoming for the year. And like I said, Only If You're Lucky. This was Stacy Willingham's newest book. I had read her 2 previous books and really liked one of them, and one of them was pretty good. This one is probably my least favorite. I did give it 3.5 stars. A few people kind of have a similar rating of chill for me. And again, kind of a similar complaint to She Was the Quiet One, where basically the main characters are all college-age women in a dorm, essentially, and dealing with a lot of college drama. And the mystery was kind of interesting, and the pacing of it was definitely kind of slower. There's a lot of twists in this book. There's some twists that I actually really liked. I'm obviously not going to spoil those, but there was at least one that I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I didn't see that coming. But then you get further in and you're just like, wait a minute, this is kind of dumb. Overall, definitely my least favorite of her books so far. Definitely my favorite was Flicker in the Dark. That book was excellent. I will definitely be checking out more of her books, but if her books kind of tend towards this one, where it's just like it's good, but it's not as good as Flicker in the Dark, I might stop trying to read her. But overall, this one was good, but it wasn't like the best thing ever. Next book I have to talk about is The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. And this is the first book in the Tide Child trilogy. And this is a fantasy trilogy, if you couldn't tell by the dragon. And this one was interesting because I had previously tried to read this book and I DNF'd it temporarily. It wasn't a permanent DNF. I just was not in a fantasy mood. And this time around, I definitely purposely read it slowly. So I started out reading like just 3 chapters a day. I'm like, okay, just in case you really don't like it, just kind of dip your toes in a little bit at a time. And I definitely enjoyed that reading experience of this author a lot more because there's a lot to like unpack here. There's a lot of terminology and a lot of characters to kind of keep track of, and the writing style is very unique. But I did grow to love it. Well, maybe not love it, but I really enjoyed it by the end. It took a while for me to get invested. There is a turning point where I'm like, oh, okay, we have kind of our main, not premise, but like main motivation of the book. And once we get to that point, I really liked it. So overall, kind of a mucky start because it wasn't perfect, But by the end, I was invested enough to really enjoy it. So I gave it 3.5 stars, and I'm definitely looking forward to checking out the sequels. I'm not sure. I'm not going to read them like back to back to back, but at some point this year, I will be reading book 2, and hopefully it's better than book 1. I did enjoy it, but not like an all-time favorite so far. I also checked out Slewfoot, which is by Brom, and I had read 3 of his books. And actually, I think this was the last one I had to read. I think he has a new one coming out, but this was the last one of his now published books that I had to read. The Child Thief, very good. Krampus is an all-time favorite. And then the one that I've read just recently, The Lost Gods, it was pretty good. 3.5 stars. It was fine. Slewfoot, I gave 4 stars. I did enjoy it. Written kind of differently than his other books. A lot of his other books kind of have like these big, like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just written differently. But I did enjoy it. It was more small scale, I guess, because you're really dealing with this one lady here. And Brown books are kind of hard to talk about because you really don't want to spoil anything. I will say, like, if you do like, I don't know, like 1600s style stories where like it takes place like in the colonies of like 1600s, and then if you also like witchcraft or like folklore, that kind of stuff, you'd really dig this book because there's a lot of that in here. I really did enjoy it. It wasn't nearly as good as something like Krampus, which was just a lot of fun. I wouldn't necessarily say this book is fun, but it's definitely, it gets crazy. This book gets crazy by the end. It was definitely more slow paced too, whereas a lot of his other books are kind of more fast paced. So yeah, I really did like it. Maybe not a book that I would go back to a lot, like I would Krampus. Like I do want to reread Krampus at some point, but definitely worth a read, especially if you're into witchcraft. Another book I read was The Devil in Silver by Victor LaValle. And I picked this book up from Barnes & Noble because I read recently The Changeling, which I really enjoyed. I gave that one 4.5 stars. That book just was one of the weirdest books I had ever read. And then I read this book, which is also one of the weirdest books I've ever read. I love an author that takes risks. And sometimes those risks don't also... Sometimes those risks don't necessarily always land, but I love an author's ambition to try new things. And just reading 2 of his novels, I can already tell that he's never going to write the same story twice, because these are vastly different books, very different premises, and I love both of them. This one follows a guy who is kind of stuck under a mandatory psychiatric evaluation, which is supposed to be for like 72 hours. It kind of escalates and he's in there for a bit longer. I don't know if you can tell, but there is a buffalo on the cover, which does come into play. And again, this is one of those books where you should just jump in without knowing too much. I'm glad I did that because there was some weird stuff in this book. And I'm finding that I really like jumping into weird stuff just because I really don't like reading cookie cutter stuff that's just the same story I've always read. So reading stuff like this is just a fresh breath of air. I really liked it, and I'm definitely looking forward to checking out more by Victor LaValle. I also read The Blinding Knife by Brent Weeks, and this is the second book in the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. And this is a read-along that we're actually doing on Book Astronomer Discord. We did The Black Prism in January, and then we read Blinding Knife in February, and then we're going to be reading books 3, 4, and 5 in March, April, and May. Those are the months. But like I said, I read book 2, and I also gave this one 4 stars. I gave book 1 4 stars as well. I wouldn't say this is like an all-time favorite fantasy series, but at this point I am invested, especially in the main character of Kip. He's definitely turning into one of my all-time favorite characters. And of course, this is book 2. I don't want to go into too much spoilery stuff, but we do get a lot of interesting reveals. And this book was also interesting because I normally don't like school settings, but Kip is kind of in a school setting. but I just love Kip so much that like it didn't even matter. And another reason why it's not like a 5-star all-time favorite fantasy series is that there are a couple of POVs that I'm not that interested in. And then again, if you've read this book and you want to go check out the channel for it in the Book of Starmer Discord, I go into a lot of detail about my gripes with this book. It was mostly positive, but there are a few things that are just like, I didn't love that. But overall, I'm definitely invested, especially in Kip, one of my favorite fantasy characters that I'm reading right now. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading book 3 in March. All right, now we're getting to my top 3 reads of February. This next book I really, really enjoyed, and that would be Eyes of the Void by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this is book 2 in the Final Architecture trilogy, and I love that green. I love that green spine. Book 1 was Shards of Earth, which I read in January. Really liked it, gave it 4 stars. I think I liked this book slightly more, not necessarily because it was just so much better, but because by this point, I have a firm grasp of who these characters are, what the backstory is, what's going on. Whereas book 1, I really needed to get my footing in and just figure out what the hell is going on. With this book, I kind of have a firmer grasp, firmly grasp it. I have a firmer grasp of what is going on, and this book gets crazy, definitely by the end. And I love one of the main characters, Idris, I think is how you say it. He is one of the best sci-fi characters I've ever read. I'm just fascinated by his story and what goes on with his story. And yeah, and again, this is book 2, so I can't really talk about the plot elements necessarily because you have to read book 1. But just the directions this book goes in and just the questions that I have going into book 3, I'm super excited to get to the conclusion, which is Lords of Uncreation, which is a very fun title. I'll be reading that in March. But yeah, Eyes of the Void, I think so far might be my favorite Tchaikovsky book. Children of Time is definitely up there too, but this one was just spectacular. 4.5 stars. And now we're getting... Oh, let me sit down first. And now we're getting to the 2 books that I gave 5 stars to. This one is a reread, so I already knew it was going to be 5 stars. This is my 3rd time reading this book, and I really enjoy it. And that would, of course, be My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. And this is the first book in the Indian Lake trilogy. I think that's what it's called. Something like that. But yeah, book 1 is amazing. One of my all-time favorite horror characters is Jade Daniels. Love this book. Love her character. I just love this book. And I love all of like the little horror movie trivia details we get sprinkled throughout. And then I just love how chaotic this book is. And it just, I don't want to gush too much because this is a reread. So of course I love it. But yeah, I love this book. And book 3 comes out late March. So what I'm going to do is read book 2 in March and then probably just read book 3 in April. Because I don't want to plan on reading it in March because it comes out like March 26th or whatever. So I'll just wait till April. But yeah, man, book 1 is amazing. 5 stars. And now we're getting to one of the biggest surprises for me of the year so far. It's my very first 5-star read of the year. It was not looking good for a long time because usually, like, I'm not a 5-star strumpet like a lot of people are, but I don't want to say a lot of people, but yeah, I usually give out more than this amount of 5 stars. Usually, I think just because last year I started out so strong with a couple of books that ended up being in my top 10 books of last year. So I was kind of disappointed, like no 5 stars in January, and then it was looking like there was going to be no 5 stars in February. So it's just like, well, might as well pick up a book that will probably not be 5 stars. But then what did you know? It was 5 stars. And that would be Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. This book, I went in with very low expectations because I had heard so many people not enjoy this book. Has a very low Goodreads ratings, and and then also I just really don't like this cover. I hate that color of pink. But yeah, overall, I loved this book. It was 5 stars. I was enthralled from the very beginning. And like I said, I love when books just go in weird directions. And that's what all this book is. Like, you get to the end and you're just like, what the hell is happening? But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the main character of Vera. It's basically about this woman returning to her childhood home and dealing with her mother, and then dealing with, the fact that her dad was accused of being a serial killer. And like I said, it just goes into some wild directions that I was not expecting. I completely understand why people don't like this book and don't love the ending and why it has such a low Goodreads ratings. But it just goes to show you that I just tend to love poorly reviewed horror books, I guess. Like Zoe Stage, some Stephen Graham Jones books. I don't know, just a lot of the grip of it. I don't know. I tend to love horror books that not everyone loves. So I should basically just go on Goodreads and just look up the worst rated horror books and just read all of them because I'm going to love them, right? But yeah, I absolutely loved this book. This is definitely a contender for being in my top. Well, it's got to be in my top 10 at this rate because it's my only 5-star book of the year. But yeah, I love this book, and I could definitely see myself rereading it in the future. And yeah, I loved it. 5 stars. All right, so those are all of the books that I managed to get to in the month of February. And like I said, overall, a lot better than January, because January was definitely a mixed bag. But February, I had a lot of new favorites, including my very first 5-star book, Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. Loved it. And I would love to know what you guys think of Just Like Home, because I know a lot of people don't like that book. And just any other books that I read, definitely comment down your opinions below. What was your favorite and least favorite books of February? Also, if you just want to mention all of the books you read in February, comment down below. I read all the comments and I try to get to as many as possible. Thank you guys so much for watching. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. And I also have the Bookish Drummer Discord link down below. I also have a Patreon page if you want to go support me there, and my Amazon wish list if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.